Soon after that, our children were born. James, now he is 14 years old, and Elaine, now she is 19 years old. They were the object of our pride, and we believed that a successful future awaited them. They had a friendly group of friends, they studied well, and their periodic quarrels gave us pleasure. Although there was no strong passion in our relationship, mine and Ellie's, we were connected by a meaningful and harmonious connection. We argued from time to time, mostly over the kids. She showed a strong, protective instinct towards them, and it was unpleasant for her when I defended my authority in various issues arising during the upbringing of two children. Her arguments reached a certain point, after which she abruptly switched to another topic, apparently coming to an internal decision. Over time, this has become a habit for us. The intimate life was satisfactory. Ideally, I would have wanted more during the week, but Ellie constantly refused me under various pretexts. As a result, I adapted and began to be content with days off as an opportunity to satisfy these needs. Our intimate moments were far from being called making love. Rather, they were caused by a primal desire to satisfy yourself, especially me. Despite my attempts to bring more excitement and variety into our intimate relationship, my efforts were in vain. In the end, we plunged into a monotonous routine and accepted it as the norm. However, I had no right to complain, because Ellie was undeniably gorgeous, and we had two beautiful children whom we raised together. The tranquility of our life began to collapse unexpectedly one Thursday during a lunch break in the staff room. Although I taught at a junior school, it was connected to a large high school campus. While working as a primary school teacher, I had the opportunity to socialize and have lunch with senior teachers in the staff room. This allowed me to establish friendly relations with many of them. One day, during a rare lunch break, when I was not on duty at the playground and was not burrowing into the marks, Pat Collins, the head of the Department of Natural Sciences of the high school, approached me with a proposal. He asked if I could help a group of 12th grade students in testing new interesting equipment. Being a person who is always ready to help, I gladly accepted his offer. I am somewhat wary of possible practical jokes, I replied to the poet. Are you trying to measure the size of a human brain and plan to calibrate the machine to the maximum possible limit first? He laughed. No, it's not that simple. We received a basic device for taking DNA samples from the university for temporary use. It is intended for a group of talented 12th grade students who have been selected to study natural sciences at the university next year. It is a great honor for us. As far as I know, this has not happened yet. Of course, I responded. But may I know the reason why you needed my help? This situation interested me. We need people who could become test subjects for DNA analysis. For reasons of child safety, we cannot use persons associated with our educational institutions, including students and staff. Thus, we need completely anonymous test subjects who cannot be traced to our team or university. Could you help us? Please note that the identities of the subjects should not be disclosed, but one of them should be biologically related to the parent, and the other should not. A team of science students will use a DNA device to determine which of the subjects fits each category. Instead of involving my own children in solving the problem, I had to be careful not to inadvertently give a hint to students. To complete the task, only 3 strands of hair were required. 1 from a parent, 1 from a related child, and 1 from a non-native. When I hesitated, Pat looked at me expectantly. He stressed that by participating in the project, I will bring great benefit to this particular group of students. After all, such opportunities fall out infrequently. I thought for a moment before replying, why not? Deep down, I knew that my own children would really be used in this experiment, but I decided not to tell Pat about it. He handed me special containers that guarantee the prevention of cross-contamination of samples. I got curious. Why are you giving me 6 containers? Wasting no time, he replied, in case you make a mistake with any of the samples. I replied, playfully mimicking him, oh, so junior teachers are considered illiterate, right? This exchange of jokes was a common occurrence between us as we were good friends. Thursday evening was the perfect time for sampling, as Ellie, my wife, was absent due to a late shift. The thought of how she would react when she found out that her children were being used in a scientific experiment amused me. A friend from school, Patsy Jefferson, came to her daughter for the night. Patsy had been a close friend of Elaine's for a long time. We had known Patsy's parents, John, and Shelley since university days and often talked with them. Shelley, in particular, I liked for her warm and good-natured nature. On the other hand, John, her husband, was friendly and talkative, but there was always a hint of restraint in his behavior. Sometimes I noticed that he was looking at me with some unusual look that I could not decipher, but there was some kind of self-satisfaction in him. It was as if he had some knowledge that I was not given. However, Ellie really liked to communicate with a variety of people. Surprisingly, collecting hair samples turned out to be easier than expected. Getting her own lock of hair turned out to be easy, and Elaine, with the help of a comb standing in the closet in the bathroom. We each had our own locker in our shared bathroom, and Elaine and Ellie always used their own combs. By pure chance, a lock of Patsy's hair fell into my hands. During a break from classes, both girls were running around the break room merrily when Patsy's shoulder-length hair caught on one of the chairs near the dining table. Elaine burst into fits of laughter while Patsy tried to untangle her hair, which was tangled in the crack of the chair. After some perseverance, Patsy managed to untangle it, however, leaving a few small strands of her hair. Success! Sample number 3 is completed. Moving on, I went to James' bedroom and pulled out one of his hairs, not noticing how he was immersed in the music in the room. Now, I had 4 samples, my own, 2 samples related to Elaine and James, and 1 sample unrelated to them. I had 2 empty containers left, and I tried not to contaminate the other samples. For fun, I decided to include one of Ellie's hairs from her comb in it. Just for fun, I carefully labeled each container and recorded the respective owners. My container was labeled as O, Elaine and James samples as B and C, Patsy as D, and Ellie as E. I was looking forward to the results, as it would serve as a test of the team's accuracy and give them valuable diagnostic experience before entering the university. Without delay, the next day I handed over the PET samples. His surprise at the additional 2 samples was obvious, but he said it would increase the reliability of testing. Since it was Friday, I didn't expect the results to be received anytime soon, and continued to go about my usual business for the next week. Suddenly, in the staff room, Pat came up to me again. "Hi Al, the team got the results, they are very happy." The mentors from the university were very impressed with their work and how the DNA block works in the hands of relatively inexperienced people. I can guarantee that this group of students demonstrates great potential in the field of science for the coming year. Giving them 5 samples was a wise decision, as it really presented a difficulty for them. But I have received a report on the results, and although I do not need any information about their identity or origin, I am grateful for your help. As for the DNA result, I decided to wait with the opening of the brown envelope until I returned home, as I had to prepare for a lesson in the 6th grade. The report itself was quite simple, and began with a detailed explanation of the technique used to determine the DNA sequences of each sample. After that, a visual table was presented, in which the kinship relationships between the samples were indicated. It followed from the table that sample A was unrelated to any of the other samples, while sample E turned out to be related to samples B and C. Similarly, sample D also appeared to be related to samples B and C. It is noteworthy that sample E had no connection with sample D. Further in the text, it was assured that the university DNA laboratory carefully checked the results, which guarantees an extremely low probability of error. Finally, the text expressed gratitude to the students of the 12th grade for their exemplary behavior during work. The letter expressed appreciation for the amazing accuracy. According to the letter, the results were flawless in every way. It was only after I read the report again that the full horror of the results fell on me. I felt my hands shaking when I realized the essence of what was happening. It was a complete shock, as if I was caught off guard by a powerful blow. The results showed that I, called sample A, am not a biological relative of my own children, samples B and C. It was impossible to believe. I'd always considered myself their father, but now it seemed like there was a biological connection between Ellie and me. In addition, it was mentioned that Patsy is a relative of Helen and James. This revelation left me completely perplexed. The severity of these results was unbearable. My mind was racing, jumping from one thought to another, refusing to accept the obvious truth that I had been deceived throughout my marriage. "No, no, no, Ellie, no," I shouted, and these words echoed through the empty house. Fortunately, no one was home yet. The emptiness in the house suddenly seemed suffocating to me. I spun on the spot and collapsed on the floor in the kitchen, losing consciousness. Dad, are you okay? Elaine's voice broke through the foggy consciousness and brought me back to reality. I think so, I muttered weakly. I barely opened my eyes, but I could only make out the vague face of my daughter, full of obvious concern. Was it really my daughter, Elaine? The terrible truth hit me again, forcing me to my feet, and I shook my head, trying to shake off the drowsiness. Running my hand through my hair, I shuddered, feeling a tender bump in the place where my skull took the blow from falling to the floor. Oh, I couldn't help exclaiming, my hand was stained with blood. A moment later, Elaine appeared with a napkin, ice, and a glass of cold water. Sipping water and applying ice to the injury, I muttered words of gratitude. Thank you, I said. I do not know exactly what happened. I was engrossed in reading this report, and the next moment I realized that you were calling my name. I must have slipped or something, but I think everything will be fine in a minute. I'm going to go to my room and rest. James and Mom will be home soon. Do you think you can handle dinner? Elaine quickly replied, Of course, Dad. You really scared me, you know. I thought you were having a heart attack or something. My next step was to be artificial respiration. When I thought that all the school physical education lessons suddenly made sense, a grin broke from my lips. I love you and now go and rest, she said, and these words struck my heart with a force that surpassed a heart attack. Elaine, my daughter, but not really mine. Despite the fact that I was not her biological father, I cherished her very much, and she loved me as her father. Maybe I'm not the biological father, but just a fool who provided for her upbringing, who hugged her through tears and escorted her to school every morning. The DNA test cruelly threw this truth in my face, but its consequences didn't just knock me down, they broke my heart. When I sat down on the lounge chair in the living room, it served as a pillow for my restless thoughts. Thoughts revolved around the betrayal of Ellie, and not once or twice. I couldn't help but wonder how many more times has she betrayed. It was unpleasant for me to think that 2 known cases of infidelity occurred with a difference of several years. What happened during this unaccounted time, or before, or after? What about now? Is she still unfaithful? The very thought of it puzzled me. How could Ellie, my wife, my love, my partner, go to such a deception? We were a team, inseparable in everything we did. Others often admired our seemingly wonderful union because we rarely quarreled. With the age of opportunity, our intimacy became less frequent, usually limited to weekends. In addition, the presence of teenage children led to the fact that we were less likely to be alone with ourselves, since we could not make noise and freely indulge our desires. Thinking, I unconsciously repeated the word how, and only then realized that Elaine came into the room with a cup of coffee for me. I don't know how either, Dad, she replied, thinking I had asked her a question. I looked around the room for possible danger of tripping, but the floor was dry and without any objects on which to slip. It looks like you were engrossed in reading when you came into the kitchen. It looks like it's some kind of scientific report. Dad, it would be better if you did your job sitting at the table. Despite the swearing, she kindly handed me coffee and a crumpled report, muttering in disappointment. Thanks for everything, Lenny, I replied, using her affectionate nickname when she scolded me. She smiled and left the room to continue cooking dinner. I needed to gather my thoughts and approach the situation logically to understand if there was any mistake here. If I had continued like this and it turned out to be a mistake, I would have had to figure it out. My relationship with Ellie and the kids has already been irreparably damaged. Ellie's betrayal with John Jefferson became obvious, not once, but many times. This news alarmed me, making my hands tremble. I had already realized that this was a manifestation of emotional instability, and I knew that I urgently needed to regain control of my emotions and external behavior. Fortunately, as a teacher, I have honed my management skills in both. This was especially important in communicating with parents who willingly enrolled their children in my classes every year. By the time I finished my coffee, I had successfully sorted out the situation. While the ice was melting, it was running down my face. Just then, James and Ellie entered the room. Are you okay, Dad? James asked. I'm holding on, son. Maybe it's time to think about a wheelchair, he playfully suggested, examining my head injury. It probably hurts. He grinned and went to his room. Worried, Ellie came over and assessed the wound from a medical point of view. Stitches are not necessary, but ice will have to be applied for a while. What was Elaine thinking? Using one of my beautiful tea towels, I will spray and soak it to remove bloodstains. I'll be back soon with a fresh napkin and ice, she said, quickly left the room, and then started applying a new bandage. I felt satisfied that I had managed to remain calm during the whole ordeal. But at every touch and examination of the wound, I could not help but shudder. Not from pain, but from the realization of betrayal, which now seemed obvious to me. Ellie, on the contrary, believed that my reaction was caused solely by pain. "Don't be so sensitive," she cooed when I tried to pull away from her touch. "Let's go to dinner. I really need a shower. Elaine cooked diligently for you." She giggled, but I couldn't find the strength to laugh as I clumsily climbed the stairs and joined my family at the table. My family? This lie permeated all my thoughts. I almost lost control of myself. Fortunately, everyone attributed my strange behavior to a recent fall and brushed it off. Later, when I went to bed, it dawned on me that I had successfully coped with the first day of deception. I could handle it. As a teacher, I had several days every year that I could use as sick days. Given the enormous stress associated with the work of a teacher, it is important to understand that these days can also serve as a much-needed respite for mental health. One of the advantages of working in a trade union is the opportunity to take advantage of this privilege. Realizing this, I decided to contact the junior principal of the school to discuss the possibility of taking a week off. When she found out my track record and felt the seriousness of my request, she was taken aback. "This seems unexpected. Al, is there anything specific I should know about?" "What is it?" she asked, pausing in anticipation. Reluctantly, I answered, "I'd rather not reveal the details at the moment, boss. I just need to be alone at home to resolve some personal issues that require serious consideration given my current state of mind." "Don't worry, Al. I know you're not just messing around, but I recognize your strong work ethic. I hope your absence will be helpful to you. And now? Go ahead. I will arrange for a substitute teacher to lead your class during the week. Just leave all your lesson plans on the table for the substitute teacher." This weekend seemed unreal to me. At home, I continued to have normal conversations, but tried to spend as much time away from Ellie as possible, pretending that I urgently needed to do various things in the yard. The most difficult was the mealtime. Against the background of the usual cheerful family communication, it was difficult for me to take an active part. Avoiding direct eye contact with Ellie has become a constant problem. Occasionally, I had to smile, pretending that everything was fine. But every time I saw James and Elaine, my heart broke to pieces. At night, I retreated into myself, justifying my early departure with such pretexts as working in the yard and recovering from a fall. Surprisingly, Ellie showed no interest in intimacy throughout the weekend. Perhaps it was my paranoid state, but I felt a barely perceptible sigh of relief, which she tried to hide. On Monday morning, I stuck to my usual work schedule. Ellie's schedule for the week consisted of day shifts, so she would be absent during my regular school hours. James, as usual, will attend school, and Elaine had a whole week of studying at the university. In fact, it looked like I would go to school as usual, and the rest of the family would go about their usual business. It was wonderful because I was free to explore whatever I needed. My logical mindset of the teacher turned on, and after a while I made a list of things that needed to be checked. First on the list was going through Ellie's personal belongings in search of clues that might give me answers. Who, when, where, and why. Monitor Ellie's actions during business hours, as any suspicious behavior is likely to happen there. She rarely goes out with friends or attends social events on her own. Purchase a tracking device for Ellie's car, investigate the actions and whereabouts of John Jefferson. Consult with a lawyer to explore possible options. It turned out to be quite easy to complete the first task, because now I had unlimited access to the whole house. I thoroughly combed every corner, including Ellie's wardrobe, bedside table, and even the attic, but I didn't find any evidence of any actions. But then something unusual caught my attention. In the room I noticed a photo album, which apparently was often taken out and replaced. The absence of the usual layer of dust on this album made it stand out from the others. I sank into my usual chair with a sense of defeat, thinking about where else to continue the search. It was at this moment that curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to get her albums from the shelf. These photo albums were long forgotten, left without attention and care. Flipping through the pages, I realized that the photos in them were not ordinary pictures of the usual hangouts. On the contrary, they were all made within the walls of a local hospital. Usually Ellie dressed in hospital gowns, but sometimes she chose more revealing dresses. In the past, I could have been proud of it. Ellie was undeniably attractive, and her careful choice of clothes was able to attract the attention of any man nearby, regardless of age. But instead of pride, I was overwhelmed with a sense of betrayal. It became clear that she had dressed up not to impress me but to attract John's attention. The secret glances and sly smiles exchanged by the members of our company suddenly fell into place, leaving me feeling completely betrayed. I could feel John's thoughts full of pity for me as a naive fool who did not notice that he and Ellie were freely indulging in their romance. And probably without even knowing that we have 2 children who were his biological ones. At that moment, my consciousness seemed to be transported into a parallel universe, disconnected from reality, as if I lived in a movie. Everything that I used to think was true suddenly seemed unreal. Marriage, children, family. It's amazing how quickly a lifelong love for a special person can turn into fierce hatred. This was the reality of this alternate universe. Despite the desire to give in to despair and give up life, I did not allow myself to go down this path. I had plans that I had to fulfill. It was the sight of this single photo album that ignited the flame of my love for Ellie. Every ounce of love splashed out on the floor of the room. Determined, I scrupulously scanned each photo and created a password-protected folder on my computer to save my findings. Now it was time to move on to the next item on my agenda, but suddenly I was caught off guard. The clock struck 11 o'clock, reminding that Ellie's lunch break is scheduled for 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I had enough time to get to the hospital where she was staying to find out what she was doing. Anticipating the need, I brought with me my reliable camera with a telescope lens. Fortunately, it was easy to find a parking spot at this time of day, and luck was on my side. I found a place in the back of the parking lot. It was successfully hidden from casual observers near the main entrance, but at the same time it was possible to observe everyone who comes and goes from it. Shortly before noon at 5 minutes past 11, I saw John walking confidently towards the hospital, as if he had done this countless times before. Then, at 5 minutes past 11, Ellie came out of the building. Perhaps it wouldn't have seemed significant at first if it wasn't for the fact that she was closely related to John. Their hands were intertwined. At that moment, my affection for Ellie manifested itself again in the form of anger. The rage was directed at both her and John. Almost instinctively, I turned on my camera and took a few pictures of the couple leaving the hospital and heading to Ellie's car, which, fortunately, was parked far away from mine. When they exchanged a passionate kiss before getting into the car, my anger flared up even more. Deciding to keep a safe distance, I quietly fell in behind them. Unaware of my presence, they showed no signs of suspicion, did not make sharp turns, and did not look over their shoulders in search of possible pursuers. They got away with it for a long time, leaving no doubt that they can do as they please. Both of them were firmly convinced that the stupid husband was at school as usual, so why should they worry? The car stopped near a hotel. A motel located a short distance from the hospital. This institution mainly served hospital patients and their non-resident relatives. Hurriedly getting out of the car, they rushed into the lobby of the hotel, where, as it turned out, it was possible to go straight to the room. The receptionist, without saying a word, just handed them the key with a gesture. After they disappeared into the elevator, I leisurely walked to the reception, feigning interest in the surrounding environment. A small talk ensued with the administrator, and I casually mentioned how the departing couple was in a hurry. But her answer caused such a deep resonance in me that it seemed as if it could penetrate into the very soul. The pain was unbearable, threatening to destroy my composure and throw out a stream of curses to the whole world. In a heartbreaking tone, she said that the couple were regular visitors here. 4 times a week they rented a room and quickly ate takeaway food. Despite the time that has passed, I am touched by the love of this couple. While she was telling me how they often visited this place, thoughts suddenly invaded my head. We were a married couple, at least she had to believe it. But the administrator's voice continued to sound, ignoring my intervention. She said that she has been working in this place for 15 years, and from Monday to Thursday they always have the same daily routine, like clockwork. Even when my wife was pregnant, she and James came here regularly, spending about an hour and a half here each time. However, it was noticeable that they never came here during the school holidays. The receptionist asked if I needed a room, to which I politely refused, explaining that I was just exploring possible accommodation options for visiting representatives of my company. Luckily, I managed to find my way to my car, feeling a little lost. As I expected, about an hour later they were walking leisurely to their car, snacking on sandwiches. Knowing Ellie well, I immediately realized from her facial expression and gait that she had just had a good time with her lover. My camera captured it again, and I could hardly contain my anger, resisting the urge to engage in a fight with these disgusting people. From that moment on I couldn't help but think of them as despicable and disgusting. They drove off, leaving me in a state of shock in the hotel parking lot. While I was sitting in a daze, the receptionist noticed me and waved a friendly hand. Perhaps she had a lunch break. It gave the impression that she was showing goodwill towards a potential client of the hotel. In a friendly outburst, she came up to me and asked if I had any other requests regarding the services of the hotel. I politely declined her offer, thanked her and left. When I got to my house, I put the photos in folders and moved on to the next task. To my surprise, it was still only Monday. To solve a specific problem, I conducted an internet search, as a result of which I found an inconspicuous GPS tracking device in one of the local stores. When the clock struck 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I had enough time to purchase it and return home before my usual arrival. Spending $200, I finally purchased the device along with a brief instruction. I managed to get home by 3:30, and I immediately sat down at my desk, pretending to be absorbed in parsing papers. But my peaceful image was abruptly interrupted when Elaine burst through the door. The night was restless, and in the early morning I felt exhausted. A cup of coffee and a quick facial wash allowed me to wake up enough to install a tracker in Ellie's car and configure the appropriate application on the computer. After adjusting the settings, I made breakfast and went about my usual business, as if it was a normal working day at school. Curiosity made me Google information about local divorce lawyers, which turned out to be very informative. There were countless options on the screen. I chose one of them at random and called on the phone to find out about the possibility of making an appointment for today. Fortunately, there were empty seats. At 11 o'clock, I was sitting excitedly in a small reception room that radiated knowledge and history. "Hello, Mr. Webb. May I call you Elle?" Without giving me a chance to answer, she introduced herself as Jane Lober, a divorce lawyer. After inquiring about my needs, she asked, "How can I help you, Elle?" Gathering my thoughts, I was able to tell about the events that have occurred over the past few days. It was only after a moment that I realized that tears were flowing uncontrollably down my face. Finally, I plucked up the courage and for the first time openly admitted what was happening to me. It was also the first time I confided in someone about this. Jane, armed with a large supply of napkins, listened attentively to me, making notes. Throughout my story, she occasionally uttered a quiet, or good. When I finished telling, there was an awkward silence. I blew my nose when Jane started talking, looking through her notes. "Well, Al, that wasn't a bad story," she remarked. "Do you happen to have any evidence to support all of this?" Jane asked. I began to describe in detail the photographic evidence that I have managed to collect so far. I did not inform Jane about the GPS tracker, fearing that she would declare its illegality and unacceptability in court. "Okay," Jane replied. "Obviously, you have a good reason to file a lawsuit against John over unpaid alimony for all these years. In addition, you could sue him for alienation of affection, but this would require strong evidence that he somehow forced Ellie into a relationship. Based on the information you provided, this seems extremely unlikely. As for you and Ellie, judging by your story, the likely outcome will be a divorce. But at the same time, it is necessary that you recognize that this meets the requirements of the law. The existence of love affairs does not contradict the law, and the vows given during the wedding have no legal force. In case of divorce, Both partners will be treated as equal. Any financial settlement will not be affected by your wife's infidelity. Since you both work and receive the same income, the issues of child support will be neutralized. Also, since your daughter is already 19 years old, she is no longer part of the solution to the problem. But James's situation is different, and it will depend on the financial consequences of the decision on the order of residence. Guardian James will receive 70% of the value of the house, and the remaining 30% will be distributed among other parents, as determined by the court. The division of funds and other assets will also be determined by the court. This is not an easy process, so it is important to think about whether you really want to go down this path. She looked at me through her glasses again. For a moment I remembered everything I had learned recently. The results of the DNA analysis, the cherished photo album, the incident at the hotel. Without hesitation I confirmed, yes, absolutely. All right then, she replied. By Thursday, I will complete the preparation of the necessary documents and prepare them for signing. After signing, the only remaining solution will be to determine the time of submission to Ellie and John. Please send all the necessary financial information specified in this brochure to my secretary by fax, SMS, or email. I'll see you on Thursday, Elle. Just don't forget to avoid any stupid or illegal actions, and we can safely continue the process. When she got up and headed for the door, I was back in the waiting room, nervously glancing at the other three waiting. At least in this situation I have company. I clearly remember my thoughts at that moment. It was absolutely obvious to me. Ellie constantly took a shower as soon as she came home from work. She justified this by saying that in this way she prevents the possible transmission of harmful hospital germs to us, innocent members of her family. But now I was sure that this was just a cover for their intimate meetings. It dawned on me that John had used the name James during their meeting at the hotel. These shocking realizations only strengthened my resolve. I knew what I had to do. The next morning I got up early, driven by a firm purpose. Without hesitation, I went to Ellie's car and carefully disassembled the GPS tracker. I didn't use it anymore. Yesterday's data showed that Ellie was engaged in her deception again. In addition, I interfered with the electrical system of the car so that it would not start. Returning soon to the kitchen, I cooked breakfast as usual and went about my usual morning chores. Hurry up, James! Ellie called impatiently. We need to leave. I can't be late for work. My mind wandered. You're going to meet your future husband, I thought with a touch of bitterness. You never know what you know, I thought to myself. Both of them, as usual, disappeared into the garage. But to their surprise, the car did not start. Ellie asked me to inspect her car, as it won't start. I casually approached without showing urgency. Lifting the hood, I pretended to fiddle with the wires, offering Ellie to try now and maybe now. Unfortunately, Ellie, it looks like you and James are going to have to take the bus today. I offered to give them a ride, but lied that I had a staff meeting in front of the school. Ellie was unhappy, but she understood that if she didn't start walking to the bus stop now, she would have to wait another 30 minutes. James was equally unimpressed. On Wednesday afternoon, Ellie returned home after a normal day at work and headed to the bedroom to take a shower. When she was already approaching the stairs, I called out to her. Ellie, I'm aware of what you and John have been doing. The reaction that followed was truly worthy of being captured on camera. Ellie froze in place, her body frozen in the middle of a step. She turned slowly towards me, grabbing the handrail for support. Her face turned pale, and she almost lost her balance on the stairs. Confused and alarmed, she muttered, "What do you mean?" I wasn't going to sugarcoat the truth. The hidden resentment that I had been hiding for so long finally broke out. I turned to her with the words, "I'm aware of your affair with John, which has been going on behind my back for almost 2 decades. I raised my voice, glad that Elaine and James were doing sports. Throughout our marriage, you cheated on me, gave birth to 2 children from him, and tricked me into believing that they were mine. If you need to contact me, contact my lawyer, whose contact information is listed in the divorce documents. I believe James and Elaine will be looking forward to your explanations about the actions you've been doing all these years." I was hoping that I would be the one to tell them the truth. I couldn't bring myself to talk about it between John and me, and also about what consequences it would have for our children. Just thinking about it made me feel depressed. Realizing that I could lose control of myself and say or do something that would greatly affect our two wonderful children for the rest of their lives. Ellie, on the other hand, collapsed on the steps, moaning and repeating in despair, "No, no." Despite her suffering, I couldn't express any sympathy for her. Instead, I turned my attention to the kitchen, focusing on cooking dinner for James, Helen, and Ellie. Surprisingly, while setting the table, I felt unusually calm, putting two envelopes, one for James, the other for Elaine, in their usual places. In every letter, I expressed my deep regret for putting you in a difficult position. My dear children, I want you to understand that if there was an alternative, a way to save you from my suffering and shame, I would certainly use it. Please believe me when I say that my love for both of you is boundless and consumes every part of my being. From the very moment you appeared in this world, I adored you and devoted myself to helping you grow into the wonderful personalities that you have become. If you ever feel the need to come to me and talk to me, which I sincerely hope, I will be there for you. I love you. I now have a new phone number, 2237. Please do not tell it to your mother, as I cannot tolerate any association with her. I sincerely hope that the explanation she will give you will not cause too much heartache, as it happened to me. Elaine and James, I understand that you are both going through a difficult time. Please believe me when I say that my anger at this situation almost destroyed me. I was thinking about ending this pain forever, but the only thing that kept me calm and focused was both of you. Your mother betrayed me. Despite the betrayal and deception, she remains your mother. When the chaos settles down and you have time to reflect, you will realize that she was a wonderful mother to both of you. But still, her actions have affected her ability to love and care for you. Don't let this overshadow all the years of happiness that you have lived together. I want you both to know that I love you. As a last thought, I came to the realization that for the sake of the children, I would eventually have to turn to my lawyer again. According to the law, he needs a guardian under the age of 16. You and Ellie have to find a way to negotiate, but she doesn't have to let you take care of James. As his mother, and John as his own father, you are an outsider in this situation. Although I already understood it, but hearing it out loud only increased my despair about the current situation. Jane kept saying that we should get a divorce, and then everything will be resolved by itself. The divorce process went on as usual, and as expected, child support was not requested. To my surprise, I received 40% of the family property, which caught Ellie by surprise, as she expected that she would receive much more. Elaine decided to live with me permanently, although sometimes she spent several nights at Ellie's. Despite the tension that has arisen between them, they have reached a quiet truce. I was happy for Elaine, but at the same time I couldn't help being angry that Ellie seemed to be the winner in this difficult situation. On the other hand, John lived in our old house with Ellie and James. He knew better than to show up at the house when Elaine was there. Somehow he managed to get a luxury apartment where he stayed when he wasn't living with Ellie. Elaine told me that James had become a complete recluse, spending most of his time locked up in his room. He refused to eat with Ellie and John, and seemed to open up only when Elaine was around. His relationship with Ellie was filled with contempt. He hardly even tried to be polite to her. He rarely spoke, responding only with a short, uninteresting mumble when addressed directly. He completely ignored John, which aggravated the already rebellious nature of the teenager and turned him into a potential disaster waiting in the wings. One day, Elaine confided in me, expressing her deep concern for him. She was afraid that if he didn't change his behavior soon, he would make a decision that he would regret forever. It seemed that he got into the wrong company at school. He started causing more and more trouble to all his teachers, causing stress. Her friends, who are still at school, told her that he completely neglects his academic duties. "Dad, what can we do?" I looked at my daughter with a heavy heart. The next morning, I met Ellie at a cafe. "Ellie, I'll be honest. You need to leave for Australia urgently. Use a fake passport and a flight voucher. Escape unnoticed. Shelley's relatives know about your relationship with John and are very angry with you." At the thought of the scale of their deception, a feeling of disgust arose in me again. "You have to give me custody of James and give the house, our old house, to James, Elaine, and the trust. I have the documents here." I put the last yellow envelope on the table. Make no mistake, Ellie. I'm offering you a way out, and not because I have any feelings for you. No, that's not right. I have feelings for you. I feel hatred for you. Pure, unmixed hatred and disgust. How did you have the nerve to do what you did to me? I will never understand the extent of your betrayal towards our marriage and our children. The love and respect I felt for you were treated with utter contempt. But I'm offering you the opportunity to get out of this situation because you're James and Elaine's mother, and I care about them very much. It is very important that there is a mother in their life. So please sign the papers and leave the country, cutting yourself out of our lives. This is your last chance. Ellie took the documents, read them carefully, and finally signed them. But it means I'm giving up on our kids, she said. Welcome to the club, BCH. Now you understand the pain I felt when I discovered your long-term deception. I got up from my seat and left the cafe, causing a collective sigh of relief from the visitors. But all attention was focused on the sobbing woman who remained sitting in place. The next day, James came to my house with all his things. "Hey, Dad, what's up? What is it?" he asked curiously. I informed him that his mother had left a note on the table, asking him to come here and prepare for a long stay. Most of her things were gone, and it seemed that she might not come back. I looked at James, my beloved son, and smiled at him encouragingly. "Don't worry, everything will be explained soon. Now go and unpack," I said. Elaine rushed into the house, hugged her brother, and helped him put things away. Local news outlets reported the unexpected disappearance of John Jefferson, a recently divorced resident of the city. There have been suggestions about his alleged connections with a known criminal. The authorities were actively investigating. In another section of the newspaper, an article was published about an incomprehensible incident related to a house fire. To our surprise, it was about our former home. Obviously, the fire broke out during an unsuccessful burglary, leaving behind obvious traces of the destruction that preceded the fire. James and Elaine took refuge in my house, where they stayed until Elaine went to university. By an unexpected coincidence, Patsy, who turned out to be her sister, was also in the same place. Shelley decided to sell her house and move to live where her daughter studied. We found solace in the fact that James often went to bed at night, immersed in the music of his favorite bands through headphones. The funds were securely stored in our offshore account, awaiting their future need. It is well known that teachers do not receive significant income. The kids and I haven't heard from Ellie in years. Apparently, she was very afraid that Shelley's relatives, whom I had exposed in Ellie's eyes as an influential criminal group, would punish her for stealing her husband from Shelley. And I decided that I didn't want to start a serious relationship anymore. Once upon a time, namely 12 years ago, I had a relationship with my ex-fiancée that lasted for 3 years. During this time, I couldn't help but notice her excessive desire to control me. She had a constant desire to know every last detail about my daily life and plans for the future. Any slight deviation from what she expected caused her to be very angry. She justified her behavior by saying that it was due to her past relationship experience, which makes her fear of betrayal. But I never betrayed her trust, and did not commit any offense, so her actions looked completely incomprehensible. My fiancé's behavior regarding our schedule has been a concern for a long time. Previously, it was easy for us to coordinate the time of rest. She willingly coordinated plans with me when I said that she had a free day. But as our relationship progressed, I noticed a change in her behavior. She was annoyed when I asked about her employment or already had plans and did not want to change them. Moreover, she offered me to work extra to save money for the wedding, which seemed strange. In addition, there were cases when she abruptly changed our plans, referring to suddenly urgent matters that required her attention. It made me feel uneasy, as if she was deliberately avoiding communication with me. When I suggested that she come in and drop something off, she insisted that it was not necessary and offered to pick it up at a certain time. Despite the fact that she technically lives with her mother, she spends a significant number of evenings at my house every week. But the situation took an intriguing turn when she asked me for a schedule to make plans, and I noticed that she was texting with someone else. By the nature of my activity, I have the opportunity to take time off later if they exceed 40 hours. It is worth noting that I maintain a close friendship with her brother, and our relationship remains unchanged. I wrote him a message in which I expressed my desire to arrange something really special for her before our anniversary and make a delightful surprise. The surprise turned out to be a wonderful stay in a hotel in Chicago, a visit to an exciting White Sox match, an acquaintance with an interesting science museum, and a treat with the best sushi, although not the most expensive. Interestingly, both she and her brother work for a company producing various goods. My brother was engaged in the production of these goods, and she was in charge of the delivery department. Fortunately, she was kind enough to share her work schedule with me. That's where things got complicated. I didn't know she was secretly avoiding extra work hours. Her work schedule consisted of long days from Monday to Friday. Each day lasted 12 hours, with the exception of Wednesday, when she worked only half the day. Strangely, around the same time that she began to show controlling behavior, she began to take time off on Wednesdays. Fortunately, I had accumulated a few days off so I could take a day off on Wednesday. Several days passed, and finally Wednesday came. I dressed in my work suit and went to work, assuming that she would also leave for her job. Since our residential complex was located on the same exit road, I had a good view of the shopping center located directly opposite. I decided to park the car in the back and waited patiently. It took about an hour when I saw a noticeable red Mustang decorated with a sticker on the rear window. This car belonged to her cousin by marriage, who was the nephew of her stepfather. They were connected not only by family ties, they grew up very close, like siblings. He constantly addressed her as his sister. In addition, I have taken a number of precautions to prepare myself. I put an outdated Acer Aspire 7720 laptop on our table, positioned so that it had a view of the living room, the entrance to the bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen. I set up the laptop for remote access and turned on notifications about any movement recorded by the webcam. A program was installed on the laptop that activated the webcam and immediately sent me an email message in case of any movement in the visibility zone. In the past, webcams did not have the ability to send notifications. Instead, a special program was installed on laptops that monitored screen activity. When the webcam motion was detected, a message was sent. This forced me to use remote access to watch live videos. Another program I used was TeamViewer, which can be compared to an earlier version of apps like Meets. TeamViewer is used mainly in the field of OT and provides remote connection or troubleshooting assistance. All that was required was an IP address. In the past, it was not possible to broadcast live, so I relied on the TeamViewer program installed on my laptop. This program allowed me to share a video recording of my screen with others, which gave me the opportunity to demonstrate computer-related tasks. However, the video quality was quite low, with a playback frequency of only 10 frames per second. Despite this limitation, I was able to gather enough information by observing some movements and facial expressions on the screen. Considering that her intentions could have been innocent, I assumed that he had stopped by to bring something or offer help, as her family members often do. At that moment, a message appeared offering remote access to the laptop. He entered the room without apparent hesitation, and she began to unbutton his shirt and kiss him. I quickly generated a unique web link for live video recording. Using the TeamViewer program, I simultaneously created a group text conversation with family members and friends, discreetly organizing these actions. The internet connection, which costs $149 per month, has a lightning-fast speed of 50 megabytes per second. With smartphones at their disposal, my family members could easily access the link in their browser. This link contained information about the intimate relationship of my fiancée with her cousin within my apartment. But not all members of our family knew about this disturbing discovery. Her mother and aunt, who are well-versed in technology, were able to easily view the contents of the site. Unfortunately, her brother couldn't check on him because he was at work, and her sister was in a similar position. Also, her cousins didn't have smartphones at the time, so they couldn't go to the link. Our group of friends, I will tell you, was a lively company of young people, most of whom were well acquainted with smartphones and had access to Wi-Fi. But in those days, there was a restriction. Only 10 people could participate in a group message. For those who had Sprint or Nextel, it was pretty chaotic. But fortunately, all of us in the neighborhood had AT&T. In addition, my backup program could only save messages with pictures, and at this time group messages were saved as individual, which created a rather confusing situation. The program did not save the media messages, as a result of which my ex and her cousin could not view them. Even though they knew about the group message, they were busy and didn't bother to check their phones. Instead of waiting or finding a more private place such as a bedroom, they preferred to engage in intimate activities right on the couch. I shared a link to the site both in the group chat of our friends and in the group chat of the family, which included her elderly grandmother. But due to her age, she hardly understood how to use the chat function. Everything happened within a few minutes. The incessant ringing of the phone disturbed the calm. Both friends and relatives called. The irreversible course of events unfolded in such a way that I had no way to turn back. Meanwhile, her phone was vibrating incessantly, but she didn't pay attention to it. It was only after the fourth or fifth call that they decided to take a break for a while. I quickly composed a text message for the group, in which I revealed an intriguing secret. Kitty, a pseudonym for her real name, and Doobie, a pseudonym for his real name, were engaged in some unsolved affair within the walls of my apartment. It is important to say that in the place where I live, I have the ability to secretly record what is happening in my own apartment. I had the full legal right to live in a residential building. It was not included in the lease agreement, and he also did not live in the same place. Consequently, she did not have the authority to invite him to my premises. It is important to note that the state in which I live allows me to record actions within my personal space, even if no other persons officially reside there. I was the only person listed in the lease agreement, as she had a unique agreement with her mother's place of residence. This circumstance arose due to the fact that she was sentenced to probation for a trifling case. As a result, it could not be included in the lease agreement. It is important to note that she did not live in my apartment. Instead, she sometimes stayed with me several nights a week. Given the nature of my schedule, which mainly occupied the afternoon and evening, our time together was limited. In order to fulfill the requirements of the probation period, she had to officially register her place of residence as her mother's address. This was evidenced by her identity card, entries in the probation card, as well as the absence of any mail or personal belongings at my house. In fact, she just kept a few changes of clothes and personal belongings there. It should be noted that the term of her suspended sentence has not been determined. Soon she ran into her boss about the loss of money. Despite the fact that she insisted that she did not take them, the boss accused her of theft and reported the incident to the authorities. As a result, she was sentenced to 6 months probation and obliged to perform community service. But the circumstances of the suspended sentence were unfair due to a misunderstanding with the boss. Initially, the boss instructed her to take the deposit to the bank, but, unfortunately, the bag with the money was gone. Unaware of this, I paid for a trip she planned to make to a neighboring state for the festival. But upon returning, the boss unfairly decided that she had used the missing money for the trip. This false accusation led to her being sentenced to probation, which caused her great suffering and deprivation. She was accused and a criminal case was opened, as they believed that she was to blame. The deposit bag accidentally slipped down and ended up wedged between the car seat and the console. When someone adjusted the seat, it tore due to the fact that it got into the sliding mechanism. When we found the bag, we immediately returned it and explained the situation. Although all the money was safe and sound, some of it was damaged. Despite this, the owner, who turned out to be a rather irritable specialist in the field of HVAC, did not believe our explanations and continued to accuse her. Fortunately, the judge was understanding, especially after we presented evidence supporting our version. In confirmation of his responsibility, the person provided proof of payment of all expenses. In fact, they informed her that if she didn't get into trouble and comply with their requests, the charges would be dropped. To strengthen her position, she participated in extensive community service. But the absence of an indication in the lease agreement and the presence of a separate postal address, which she considered her main place of residence, made it difficult to establish her status as an official tenant. In addition, she was on parole on an unfair at first glance charge, as a result of which her sentence was about 6 months. Instead of Alabama, the setting of this story is completely unique. It unfolds in a cluster of small towns located in close proximity to each other and resembling about 5 or 6 farming settlements. These towns are surrounded by vast farm fields extending further. But the main thing that distinguishes this place is the numerous nuclear facilities located in the immediate vicinity of it. Being an important source of electricity for the Chicago metropolitan area, they are of great importance for its energy supply. They abruptly stopped what they were doing when she got a call from the mother of her cousin, with whom she had a romantic relationship. She turned on the speakerphone, and I swear to you, the first words his mother uttered were, "Stop your intimate relationship with my son." Both interlocutors froze in place, and she tried to speak, stammering in the middle of a word, asking, "What do you mean?" Further, the mother said that the live broadcast initiated by me was transmitted to her entire family. In a panic, she hurriedly collected all the pillows from the sofa. She hurriedly closed her eyes, noticing that she was included in the group text and received a message. Curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to open it, quickly understanding the source of the video. Feeling awkward, she immediately closed it. At that moment, her cousin, trying to get dressed in a hurry, stumbled and accidentally hit his head on my coffee table, leaving a noticeable dent. Meanwhile, I went to the entrance to the residential complex to say goodbye to him. When he saw me, he froze and burst into tears, repeatedly apologizing. I made an unfortunate decision by getting into an unpleasant altercation that could lead to legal consequences. Fortunately, the situation did not develop further due to the fact that he invaded the territory of private property without permission. In this complex, no entry signs were installed every 30 feet. As a result, we entered into a physical struggle with each other. During the fight, I unintentionally caused him significant harm to his health, as a result of which his tooth, nose, and orbital bone were broken. In turn, his strong blows broke my arm, and he himself hit me on the ear and the side of the head with such force that it led to visible changes and dissection of the auricle. In this regard, I had to wear a cast to help the healing process. It is important to note that I also faced the consequences of my attack on him. He led a reckless and chaotic lifestyle, which inevitably led to his own troubles. Although I was injured myself, but he undoubtedly had the most severe consequences. The authorities who arrived at the scene recognized that I was a legitimate participant in the events. In this regard, he decided to withdraw the assault charges that he had previously brought against me. In response, I also decided to drop the charges against me. Subsequently, I had a conversation with the management of our residential complex. They agreed to drop the charges of illegal entry into the apartment from him. Neither he nor my ex were tenants of this apartment. Given the problems he has, he decided not to escalate the situation. During the quarrel, I received injuries, a hand injury, a swollen lip, crushed ears, and he, the absence of a front tooth, a broken nose, and damage to the eye socket. Later, I went into the apartment, where she was visibly upset and crying. I gave her an hour to collect things, since everything in the apartment, except clothes, cosmetics, and kitchen utensils, belonged to me. Unfortunately, her mother wouldn't let her move, feeling ashamed. Her brother was of the same opinion, and even the cousin's mother kicked her son out. Rumors about this incident quickly spread throughout the city, as a result of which she was deliberately avoided. In addition, it should be noted that she went to extreme revenge, trying to euthanize my cat. This incident forced me to contact the police with a statement about her actions. As mentioned earlier, I was close to being charged with assault due to a physical altercation with her cousin. In addition, I forgot to tell her that I was accused of harassment related to a past relationship, but these charges were dropped due to the fact that I decided to share the video with her family. Unfortunately, she was already on probation for a minor offense, and my actions only made her situation worse. I admit that I am not completely flawless, but I have developed the skill to solve issues fairly and equitably. A few years have passed, and I found myself in a relationship with my current spouse. After the arrival of one of the guests intending to celebrate my birthday, my ex-wife went to the bars in a state of strong alcoholic intoxication. In a state of alcoholic intoxication, she approached me, wanting to correct her past actions. But I answered her with not the kindest words, asking her to leave me alone. This led to a violent development of events when she burst into tears, became increasingly annoyed, and eventually threw a glass in my direction. My current wife, having quickly taken measures, grabbed her by the hair and forcibly escorted her out into the street, giving her a hard slap in the face. Unfortunately, this incident was followed by 3 more meetings, during which she refused to return my keys and even disappeared with my beloved pet. I took care of microchipping my cat even before our relationship began, and recently a veterinarian contacted me to check the information, but since the person indicated on the microchip was not me, I intervened before taking any further action. Before that, I asked the administrator to confirm the identity of the specified person, describing her as a woman with brown hair and a noticeable bust. The receptionist did confirm the description, and I continued to explain to her the situation and the events that had occurred. A person who used to sometimes use banned substances and was associated with the same social circles as us agreed to use derogatory expressions in her address. This created additional problems, but in the end, the situation stopped after I warned her that I could inform the authorities about her theft, and the veterinarian warned about the need to involve the police in connection with animal cruelty. She eventually moved to another state and married a firefighter. She currently works as an ambulance paramedic in Louisiana. Sometimes the idea of marrying cousins is jokingly mentioned. This idea was subtly hinted at in the wedding invitation, which was later confirmed by her brother. Curiously, the invitation only indicated the location of the wedding, Louisiana, which may not be so important, and the family can be a way for them to pass the time. Interestingly, I still have the messages I exchanged with her brother, pictures of my cast when my arm was broken, and I think a copy of the police report. This statement recorded her attempt to euthanize my cat due to her refusal to return the spare key to my apartment. The statement to the police was related to the theft of my cat, which is considered my property. I firmly believe that her brother, with whom she had a strained relationship, informed her current husband about her previous infidelity. As for the cousin, I am not sure of his involvement and have no desire to conduct further investigation. I didn't give him a chance to explain because I didn't encounter him again. Moreover, I didn't even give her an opportunity to explain herself. I made the decision to completely and permanently break off my relationship with her.